Hi, I'm Ryan Davis.
And I'm Kiernan Schmidt.
And this is Out of Office, a travel podcast.
This seat taken.
Hey, Kiernan.
Good afternoon, Ryan. Are we allowed to say what time of day we record?
Well, people know that
people listen at all times of day.
Well, people know we record at 3 a.m. And then we release at 6 a.m. That's how we do it.
We both got the day jobs. So, sometimes you got to record at 3 a.m.
Yeah, you got to. How are you today?
Oh, I'm living the dream. Thank you. And yourself?
It's beautiful out today. It's just been raining.
Absolutely. Keep it nice and unclear what day of the week it is. It's been rain, but there was some sun and it was warm, but also a bit chilly.
Yeah, it's been all those things.
See, now everyone feels that we're in their day with them.
Yeah, in their drive to work, we are sitting right there, hand on your thigh, just helping you.
I'm not sure how many of our friends own cars, actually.
Yeah. In the Uber and the bus, whatever you're doing to get to work.
Now, Ryan, today's going to be a bit of a somber episode, but also maybe a bit hopeful.
It is. I think it's going to be a little of both. Yeah.
Why is that? What are we talking about?
Well, we're coming out of Easter season, and Notre Dame had a terrible fire, but I feel like one day it's going to rise again, and we're going to talk about that today.
Much like Jesus.
Yeah.
I always like the period after Easter, before the ascension, when he ascends into heaven, where he's just kind of putzing around Earth. He stops by the apostles. He says, "Hey guys, I'm back." Thomas comes in and goes, "I don't believe it." He's like, "Stick your hand in my side. Stick your hand in my finger." I mean, stick your hand in my. Stick your finger in my hand, I guess.
Yeah,
I get confused on who has holes and what.
Yeah, Thomas didn't have any holes.
Well. But Ryan, before we get to Notre Dame, talk about that history, talk about our visits, talk about its promising future, we've got a little update, so it's time for a recalculating.
Recalculating.
Now, Ryan, you remember what recalculating is? Calculating is the segment where we sometimes revisit a topic or correct a mistake.
You've made a mistake, and we corrected it here on Recalculating.
I'm proud to say that sometimes it's your mistake. I'm proud to say this week, neither your mistake nor my own. Today, we're just doing a simple update. Now, you remember a couple weeks ago, we talked about airplane etiquette.
Right.
And we were discussing the moral implications of sitting back in your seat, of reclining in your seat.
Right, and I'm pro-recline, and you are anti-recline.
Well, I believe people have the right to recline. However, I do not feel comfortable reclining, so I sit straight up, and the person behind me is very lucky.
Right.
But I think that once again, we have shifted the conversation in the travel arena because Fast Company reports that there is big news coming out of Delta about reclining seats.
That's my airline.
All right, you ready?
Yeah.
Delta announced that on 62 of its planes, in particular those that tend to fly shorter routes when you're less likely to sleep, it will vastly limit seat recline. That figure constitutes a little less than 10% of Delta's fleet. According to Skift, which is some sort of airline blog, all economy class seats, even those fancy extra legroom ones, will go from a 4-inch recline to a 2-inch recline. All first-class seats will go from 5-inch to 3.5-inch recline.
That's a bold cut for first class. I thought they would go from 5-inch to 6-inch up there in first class.
I'm all about that. I like limiting the recline, so you still have a bit of the recline, but you're not going to run into that jam in the knee issue that bothers me so much.
Right. Well, you know how they sell those things that'll lock the recline that we talked about?
Yeah.
What if they sold one that would extend the lock of the recline? Like basically,
it's a 5. I mean, I think you're basically just talking about breaking the seat. Can we just bring a car jack and hit the side of the seat until it falls back?
Until it falls back. Yeah.
Any seat could fully recline. No, I think Delta's leading the way. I'm totally on board for this, limiting the recline.
But this is on their short. This is like Boston to DC.
But that makes total sense. I was just
what kind of person is reclining on a puddle jumper like that? Nobody.
Just last week, I was on a DC to Boston shuttle, and the person in front of me jacked that seat so far back. And it was a he, of course it was a man, didn't care what was behind him.
Man reclining.
You would have thought, that's right, he was man reclining.
He was man reclining, yeah.
And that guy went so far back, and he kept jamming it back as if like he was like wrestling with a bear in the seat, because he thought he could get just another
half an
millimeter
inch.
into my lap for like an hour flight.
Maybe he had one of these devices I'm talking about where you stick it in your seat and you get that extra inch.
It's a total nightmare. I'm all about reclining. I dream of a day where we all have to sit at exactly 90 degrees, and if you don't, a flight attendant who is a priest comes down and whacks your knuckles with a ruler.
It's like yoga posture flights. You will leave that flight with better posture than you went into it on.
Yeah, I like that. And maybe exceptions for people with scoliosis. I think people with scoliosis should get into whatever.
The full 8 inches.
Well, I hope you're referring to recline. Yeah, I think that if you're able, do that 90-degree sit-up and, go the way of Delta. Delta, 2 big thumbs up from out of office on this reclining. I would like to see the next innovation be the slow recline. As I've talked about, I don't like when they jam it back fast. I like a slow recline, just recline back.
You just like a nice, slow, even recline.
Exactly. And I think that they should adjust the seat to force you, to basically put some torque in it.
Yeah.
Is that what it would be? Or would it be anti-torque?
Why wouldn't they
I want resistance.
How come I've had electric seat recline in my minivan since 1997 and these
Oh, you're driving a minivan around Brooklyn now?
I'm not personally, but I've been in minivans where they recline. What's going on? Why can't they do that? Just a nice, slow, even mechanical recline.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I mean, that sounds very expensive. That's why.
Well, I'm sure they can afford it. It's not like Boeing's, cutting any costs in their factories over there, are they?
Do you read the article this week about how crews just leave shit inside the plane? So like they deliver the planes to the customer,
right?
And they'll just be like wrenches and like a ladder. They found a ladder that was just left inside the plane.
You think that wouldn't get past security, a big wrench and a ladder?
No, but it does. They get it through the stages and they deliver it, and then they have to be returned. I mean, I hate returning like a pair of shoes that doesn't fit. Imagine delivering a plane back.
No, that would be no fun.
Also, maybe on the flip side, you get a free ladder. That's not so bad.
The plane was pretty expensive too.
All right, Delta. Well, thank you very much. I look forward to taking many short flights on these non-reclined seats. Hell, you know what? I think maybe they should recline forward.
Scrunch you even more.
Exactly.
It's called the empathy recline. It's the forward recline. All right. Well, look, now let's recline our seats here and just head off to Paris.
Ryan, are you mad? You can't recline during takeoff. Let's take off.
Flight attendants, prepare for takeoff, please.
All right. We are going to talk today about Notre Dame, kind of give you a holistic view of Notre Dame. I think Kiernan, who is the historian between the two of us, I'm more of the modern day sociologist. Kiernan, Kiernan's going to dive into the history here, going all the way back to 1163.
We're going to start at 1163, and year by year, I'm going to talk us through brick by brick, the construction of Notre Dame. Before I dive into the history, though, Ryan, I want to ask: you've seen Notre Dame, right?
So, funnily enough, I have been to Notre Dame.
Sure. How many times have you been to Paris?
I've been to Paris twice.
Sure.
I've been to Notre Dame, but my friend and I were in a hurry, and we didn't have a chance to go inside because there was a big line. I assumed that Notre Dame would outlive me, and I would have another chance to go to Notre Dame. And now I got to wait.
That doesn't sound like a friend. A friend like me would have said, you know what? Carpe diem. We've got to do this right now. It's on the checklist.
Yeah.
We got first trip to Paris. We absolutely have to go inside Notre Dame. Plus, you're Catholic, right?
Well, no, we went to another church.
Didn't go to the quintessential Catholic Church of Paris.
Well, I want to learn today why this was the quintessential Catholic Church of Paris. And I think that's one of the things that you might explain to me.
But before we dive into the history, though, I want to understand, do you feel regret with what's happened?
I feel so much regret about this. Absolutely. I feel regret.
A little else?
No, I mean, I feel regret that I didn't go inside, and I didn't, I would have noticed that perhaps all the wood was brittle, And
Sure. Oh, you think you might have saved it?
I think I could have been like, "Hey, look, this wood. This is dangerous." You know.
Wow. So, wow. That's well, okay. Well, I guess we can thank you for the whole thing having burned down then. Yeah. So we're gonna walk through the history, and then Ryan, you're gonna talk us through a bit of the logistics of the fire, and then we're gonna talk about the bright future ahead and how it's gonna be restored. It was begun in 1163 under the reign of King Louis VII, and the people that started it had no hope of actually seeing it completed. And the first iteration actually completed, Ryan, take a guess at how many years it took.
Oh, like 100 years.
It took over 100 years. Started in 1163, didn't finish until 1345.
Wow, as a New Yorker who takes the subway, that as a construction that timeline makes a lot of sense to me. Seems fast, actually.
That's how the MTA workers are saying. Someday my great-great-grandchildren will see this F train run on time.
Yeah.
And, it is, of course, a masterpiece of Gothic architecture. Now, as a person who fulfilled my Arts B requirement in my undergraduate years by taking Gothic cathedrals, I can tell you that one of the main attributes of a Gothic cathedral is that they want to create as much space in the walls to make them windows. So you put as little stone as possible and mostly try to make it so that when the sun shines upon it, it is just a glorious illumination of sort of the history of Catholicism and the Bible. And, the idea was if you were illiterate at that time, you'd go into a Gothic cathedral and you could learn the church, you could learn the catechism by studying the imagery in the windows. In the windows, exactly.
Yeah. And my church growing up as a kid had the Stations of the Cross on the windows.
Sure, exactly.
Yeah.
And, Notre Dame, most famed for its 3 rose windows. And these are beautiful round windows that many people during the worst of the fire were afraid would be destroyed. But in fact, they all seem to have been saved. They're being examined for closer damage. And, I couldn't help but pull down my Rick Steves Paris guide that I used on my first trip to Paris. And, that Rick Steves, he's got a real way with words. He talks about the north transept window. And he says, if you look very close, and, it's this very big, opulent window, in the very center, he says, you'll see a teeny green Mary and baby Jesus. And he's right. There's a teeny green Mary, and she continues to stand today. All of the windows were saved. And the teeny green Mary window that Rick Steves is talking about here, that is actually the oldest window with the original medieval glass still in it. And clearly well made because it survives today, thank God.
Yeah, that was one of the things I know that as it was burning, everyone's like, what is going to happen to the rose windows?
Right.
Yeah.
And now, Ryan, I've studied in academia some of the Gothic cathedrals. If I were to say the word flying buttress to you, what do you think a flying buttress is? You know what that is?
It's a buttress that flies. Unlike a grounded buttress.
Sure. So, a buttress would be something that sort of leans up against it and gives it support. Flying buttress, the reason we call it flying, and Notre Dame is renowned for its flying buttresses, is that they are removed by these beautiful kind of arcs that come off and lean against the walls. And the whole idea is that those stone walls are so tall and so thin of stone because they try to make the most of the windows that they are flying and adding extra support outside.
Wow, and I wonder if those helped the actual building not collapse from the heat of the fire.
Well, the whole point is that the building has kind of 2 building systems going on. So you have the stone exterior that you can mostly see from street level.
Sure.
And then the interior, and then the roof area and the spire that we all saw crash down, those were wooden. And so the stone pieces you wouldn't expect to burn. I think what people were most fearful of was the fire actually melting the glass or falling debris, cracking and destroying artwork.
So was the spire part of the original design of the church?
So there had been an earlier spire, but it was removed in like the 1780s, 1786 to 1791. I think they don't exactly know, or maybe it was piecemeal over that time. But it was removed because of wind damage. And then this was a recreation that was done by, I think, a 30-year-old who was commissioned to restore the cathedral. Basically, during that time, there was a big push to rehab the cathedral. It had been neglected for so long, and Victor Hugo's book, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, brought attention to the fact that this proud monument was basically crumbling. And
was home to literal monsters.
right, yeah.
That's how decrepit it was. Yeah.
Hey, hunchbacks are people too. Do you know
No.
how much of our audience is hunchbacks?
Pretty high percent, probably. So the spire is restored by this 30-year-old architect named Eugene Villette-Ladouche.
Yeah, I wasn't going to say his name.
I think I did it perfectly. My French, people always say my French is really
Sure. Yeah, no,
it's
we
better
always
than my-
say that.
it's better than my
your
Spanish.
That's
Yeah.
right.
and it was made of oak and covered with lead, and apparently it weighed 750 tons. So imagine that just collapsing on Notre Dame.
Absolutely. I'll tell you what was so lucky though was that you know that they had just removed the rooftop statues, the 12 apostles plus the 4 evangelists that absolutely would have melted, destroyed, fallen in that fire, but had been removed by crane just recently because of the restoration work that was probably the cause of the fire.
Right, and we're going to talk about how long overdue this restoration work actually was in a few minutes.
I will say, though, an interesting fact about the spire that we're talking about is that it contained relics from saints. Did you know this?
I did not know this.
So it had relics for those not creepy Catholic enough like us are pieces of saints like bone and hair that we superstitious witchcrafters believe connects us and protects us through the saints watching them. And that spire actually had in it the teeth and bones and hair of the patron saints of Paris, Saint Denis and Saint Genevieve. And so I'm still hoping that they might still find those teeth.
There is nothing worse than the smell of burning hair. So I really,
I've heard that that's the primary problem that they're facing in cleaning it up.
No.
I will say I have a real weak spot for Saint Denis because he's a martyr who was beheaded. You know the French; they love beheaded, and he's often pictured carrying his own head. Which is one of my favorite words in art history. I always look for these whenever I'm around a medieval cathedral. It's called a cephalophore. If you ever see a saint carrying a head, it's a cephalophore, and it's usually it's a martyr who was beheaded and then just carries it around.
A cephalophore.
Cephalophore. P-H. C-E-P-H.
Cephalophore.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Cephalophore.
Yeah, that's a great word.
Absolutely.
Be a good name for a band.
And then Saint Genevieve, the other patron saint, she's credited with saving Paris through prayer by diverting Attila the Hun from coming into Paris in 451. So again, really great saints. We're sorry to have lost the teeth, bone, and hair that I'm sure was the real thing that had been preserved from 451.
Totally, and they also had the crown of thorns there.
Yes.
Was that saved? We know that
that was saved. Absolutely.
Okay, great.
So,
'Cause I'm sure that was legitimate. There's no way that was not the legitimate crown of thorns.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Actually, it's fortuitous. The Parisian firefighters had recently been trained at saving and preserving artwork that was threatened, and they created a human chain into Notre Dame while the fire burned. And 2 of the most precious things that they wanted to save were St. Louis' tunic and the crown of thorns that you're naming, which had you gone inside, you would have been able to view. I've viewed them. And yes, these are, supposedly the crown of thorns that sat on Jesus's head while he was carrying the cross to be crucified. Yeah. So, pretty lucky find that.
Yeah, absolutely. So there was incredibly important stuff in Notre Dame that was not just the cathedral, but they let Notre Dame go into a major state of disrepair over the years. And most recently, actually, even in 2017, there were numerous articles that came out about how Notre Dame was in disrepair and needed desperately tens and tens of millions of dollars to renovate the actual church because it was falling apart.
And what exactly? Because it didn't really have an up to code fire system, obviously.
No, it absolutely didn't. But one of the things was that the government officials hadn't been able to really tour the entirety of Notre Dame because there were all these rooms that you couldn't open without these like single set of keys and stuff. So they actually didn't know how bad a shape Notre Dame was in until in the last few years.
Wow, that's really fascinating. And I know the area directly under the roof that was also these like it was medieval timber. I mean, it was, it actually goes back that far. They called it the forest inside Notre Dame. So you can imagine that was just it was ready to catch flame. And Ryan, you know that some of the wood in the forest that burned, it had been in place since 1160. So it actually goes back to that original building itself. And the beams and exterior of the main part of the roof, what they call the nave, which is the long aisle down the center, that was actually from 1220 and 1240. So it just goes to show. I mean, in fact, it's quite amazing that fires had not taken this out earlier.
Yeah. So Carolyn Brazulis, who is at Duke University, gave an interview to Foreign Policy recently, talking about how in need for restoration the building was. And the wooden structures between the upper parts of the vaults and the roof, she talks about how that was old timber. And for centuries, it would get heated in the summer and then frozen in the winter. And it was that process that made it incredibly flammable and why she thinks the fire was so horrific and spectacular, because those old timbers were just ready to burn ferociously.
And Ryan, as if the medieval windows, the ancient timber, the statues, the spire, as if all of these things weren't enough. Another great treasure of the cathedral that I think is actually getting lost in a lot of the news coverage is the great organ that they have. The organ dates primarily from the mid-18th century, but it has over 8,000 pipes, including some that date from the 1200s as well. So you again just showing the longevity of so many pieces, and amazingly, just like the windows, the organ is thought to have survived in pretty good shape. Of course, now they're going to have to go pipe by pipe to be sure that's actually true, but I know some pieces of hope that I'm finding in all this is that many of the most iconic pieces are saved.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're really lucky that the fire seemed confined to the roof area. And if you look at the photos inside of the actual cathedral, it looks messy and very bad. But it looks like a good part of this is going to survive.
So Ryan, I actually found I was in a meeting at the day job, and I got a text from you. That said, "Are you seeing that Notre Dame is burning?" And I honestly, I can't. When I thought in my head, "Oh, it's just this giant stone thing. How could it be burning?" I was sure that you were probably exaggerating. But then, when you clicked on any news story and saw the picture of those flames, can you kind of walk us through how did the fire progress and where did it come from?
Yeah, so the fire starts around 6:30 in the church's attic. And what appears to have happened, and look, we're not going to know the exact way that this happened for months. So they're investigating. But what appears to have happened is the fire began, and the Notre Dame computer system registers the fire and alerts it.
I believe that computer system also made from wood in the 1200s.
Well, it seems like it, because it actually doesn't know the correct area where the fire is. So it says there's a fire. They go, they look, they don't find it. They reset the system, and it's not for like another 20 minutes. When the system goes off again, they realize that this is a real fire and something is going on. So there's a huge gap of time where they could have been working on putting this fire out that was going to, in this attic, which again, full of this incredibly flammable wood. But it's too late. It begins to spread. And by 6:30, it is all around the attic. The fire burns through basically all these oak beams through the ceiling, and it kind of weakens the whole building. So the fire is not hot enough to actually damage or melt or anything the actual stone, but it can weaken the stone, and it's that sort of weakening that can allow for things to collapse.
Okay, see that now I didn't realize that.
Yeah, no, the fire it weakens the entire building. So basically, what happens is as you said, the French respond with as many people as they can. You've got people who are dedicated to pulling things out of the building. You've got firemen who are, spraying the building. There's worry though that if they, Donald Trump recommended they drop huge amounts of water from the air into the building. But of course, had you done that, apparently it would cause a lot of actually physical damage to the building because the building is hot, it's on fire, it's already weakened by the heat. If you were to drop, tons and tons of water from a helicopter, you would actually do more damage than you would be saving. It looked really bad when you and I were texting because earlier in the day I had gotten the push and I assumed it was like a little fire. It'd be like a little fire they'd put out and that would be it.
Right.
And I was in a day of meetings and it's not until I'm on the train on the way home that I see that it is, and it looks like Notre Dame is just burning to the ground.
Yeah. It was truly, it was such an inferno that you did wonder whether anything would survive.
Yeah.
So Ryan, I don't know if you felt this way, but when I saw it on fire, I have to say it affected me more deeply than I expected. I found it to be like truly, really tragic. I think I didn't know. These old, seemingly timeless buildings feel like they will be forever. And the idea that could be threatened, that we wouldn't be able to pass on to next generations. Did you find yourself just a little more deeply touched than you would have expected?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Paris, like London, holds like a special place in the imagination of a lot of Americans because they've been there, because they aspire to go there, because it's a place that is sort of magical and known throughout literature and film. So I think when people saw Notre Dame, which is something that if you haven't been to, you are at least familiar with, on fire, and the degree to which it was on fire, I mean, it was shocking. It was surreal to me, and it definitely affected me in a way that I wouldn't have imagined a building in Paris burning would have affected me.
And I think too, it shows that no matter how solid something appears, if not kept up, everything can be fragile. And that's why when you go to these places, you should absolutely take advantage of trying to see things when you can.
Right.
Because the truth is, you don't take for granted that everything's going to be there in the future unchanged. This is why you need to get to your bucket list.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I definitely regret not just waiting in line and going into Notre Dame when I had the chance a few years ago. And I've been to a lot of cathedrals, and Notre Dame's not going to be on that list for the foreseeable future.
Now, the good thing is that so much of the structure survives. Those flying buttresses did a great job. They flew high and proud. And they are going to rebuild. And so, Ryan, what is President Macron saying right now?
So President Macron thinks they can rebuild in 5 years. That seems ambitious.
Yeah. What took over 100 years can be 5 years.
Right. There's a lot of folks in the architecture community who have studied Notre Dame, who have done research on it, think it's more realistic that 10 years would still be pushing it, but that is like a more realistic build schedule. Apparently, a lot of work has to be done right now just to sort of maintain what they have. Like they're going to have to build basically a massive tent over Notre Dame, right, to keep the water damage from continuing. They're going to have to figure out a way to reinforce all the walls, to make sure that stuff doesn't begin to fall. That's something else. It's going to be something they're going to have to worry about right away. So this stuff has to happen before they can even begin what should be the actual reconstruction of the cathedral. I mean, there's a lot of work and cleanup and in preparation before that can even happen.
Yeah, so it was basically a bunch of cascading effects, right? Because you had the fire itself, then you have the water itself, the flooding itself, and now it's open to the weather, of course. So you need to create that protection for all that's left to preserve it and to rebuild it.
Yeah. So what's really interesting though about Notre Dame is because it's one of the world's most beloved buildings, there's an astonishing amount of video and photographs of it. But even better, there are full-scale digital recreations. And you and I are not gamers. You're not a gamer, are you?
I like to play a bit of Connect 4 in my time.
Connect 4?
Yeah.
So different than that is this game called Assassin's Creed, which is like
sure.
super cool. Yeah, we play
it
all
all
the time.
Is that like the Nicene Creed?
I think it's similar Creed, yeah. Assassin's
a little bit
Creed.
of a Catholic joke for all those Notre Dame fans out there.
Assassin's Creed put out a version set in Paris apparently a few years ago, and for that video game, they recreated Notre Dame in an astonishing, almost brick by brick way. So this is one of the many digital recreations. There are several other architects and scholars who have done full digital scans. that are going to be available to folks when they actually go to design what this cathedral is going to look like.
Yeah, and actually in 2015, an architect and Vassar professor whose name is Andrew Tallon had gone through and used LiDAR, the laser technology, and digital photography to create a full model of the cathedral. And he took scans in 50 different locations outside the cathedral, inside the cathedral, had 1 billion points of data. And so you can imagine these blueprints, everything from Assassin's Creed to these LiDAR reconstructions, are going to be a strong starting point for those who have to aim to restore.
And one of the questions about when they restore is, what are they going to? Are they going to build an exact replica? Are they going to modernize? There have been some really interesting images that have been going across social media of architects proposing ideas. I saw someone propose rebuilding Notre Dame with an extraordinarily beautiful roof garden on top.
Wow.
You've heard people talk about building a temporary wooden cathedral in its place while the main one is worked on, so people still have a place to visit, and where you still say, look, Notre Dame is not just a building, it's also the French community. So there's a lot of decisions that have to be made relatively quickly about what's going to happen between. They can't just have nothing there for 10 years with all these tourists. I mean, this was a place tens of millions of people came annually, right? What's going to be there, and then what exactly are they going to rebuild in its place, and what changes will they make?
Yeah, and Ryan, I actually really like that idea because I do think that for something that lasts this long, it can only be expected that things occasionally will go wrong and change. In fact, the current church was built where an earlier church was destroyed by a fire. And the Notre Dame also was struck by fire in the 13th century. We talked about the neglect that happened and then the rehabilitation through the 1800s. And so I think it's a fair. I don't think that we need to create some exact recreation. In fact, in some way, I feel like that would be kind of Disneyfied, kind of faux.
Right.
To not make it our own, to make it somehow stamped with our generation. And I think with the sort of the right approach, it could become even more inspirational in whatever new place it takes. I mean, this isn't that great of a comparison, but when you think of like how the High Line in New York was taken from kind of blight to a new active place for tourists and for New Yorkers to come and gather. So Ryan, I really like the idea of that rooftop garden. Up there with the gargoyles. The gargoyles are some of my favorite parts. Anyone that grew up on that Disney movie, which, by the way, whoever thought Hunchback of Notre Dame would be a good musical comedy by Disney, horrible idea.
I would love to go up to the top of Notre Dame when they've rebuilt it and sing Out There from Disney's Hunchback of Notre Dame.
Absolutely. Yeah. Ryan, personally, I'm partial to A Guy Like You, sung by the Gargoyles, to Quasimodo, to give him the confidence to go after Esmeralda.
Yeah, he needs that confidence that the Gargoyles give him when he's singing that song.
Absolutely.
And then when
they compare him to a croissant.
Do you remember when the city's burning and I think it's the clock sings like, Paris, a city of lovers, is glowing this evening. True. That's because it's on fire.
But still, there's a glow. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Look at us.
I believe it was the gargoyle. I don't think there was a talking clock in that one. You're probably thinking about Beauty and the Beast.
I think there's always a talking clock in any Disney film. Okay?
But Ryan, if they go through with this rooftop garden plan, one thing I can say, and this is some of the best news to come out, the flowers will be well pollinated.
Right, because there are 180,000 bees that live on Notre Dame's roof and somehow survive the fire.
So they live in 3 hives that were on Notre Dame's roof, and it was part of they were trying to fight the die off of bees that's happening.
Right.
So they created these
said,
colonies.
We'll put it somewhere really safe. Let's put it on the top of Notre Dame.
top of a wooden roof.
Nobody's going to bother the bees up here. They're going to be totally fine. And the bees are all just chilling. All of a sudden, like, what is going on?
Right, and the hives were not actually on that main roof. They were on a part of the roof above the sacristy, being a Catholic, you know what the sacristy is.
Sure.
And,
that's where the priest and I always hung out.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And the sacristy, the sexiest room in any church.
Oh, yeah.
That roof was about 100 feet below where that main roof was that was caught in the fire. So the bees were fine. Yep. So Ryan, I think it clearly shows that the Holy Spirit was with these Catholic bees, and I hope that this encourages the other bees to convert, because these guys on top of the cathedral survived the hell flames
Yeah.
and lived another day.
Yeah. They certainly saw the flames and they they repented and they're going to survive.
Oh, the tongues of fire, just like how the Holy Ghost likes to appear.
One of the things that I got out of this is that I think countries that are as lucky to have as much wealth and power as a country like France should take care of their national monuments. They shouldn't be in disrepair for decades, and people have been talking about how Notre Dame needed work for years and years and years, and things like this happen, and so people need to take care of their shit.
And also maybe make a couple extra copy of those keys to all those wooden rooms that you couldn't get into. Might be time.
Yeah, they had 200 individual keys, and they finally standardized it down to one key just before the fire broke out.
Is that right?
That is what I read in one of these many articles.
Oh,
yeah.
That's insane. All right, Ryan. Well, I think that we can close the chapter on Notre Dame. We will, of course, fill the Instagram with lots of interesting photos, both of the fire, but also of these feel-good stories and our visits to Notre Dame. I on the inside, Ryan on the outside. And with that, Ryan, I think it's time for the last stop.
The last stop.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the last stop on this train. Everyone, please leave the train.
Now, Ryan, the last stop is my favorite segment, your favorite segment, the people segment.
The listener's favorite segment.
Everybody calls it the people segment. That's sort of its own tagline. The last stop, the people's segment. And what this is each week, you and I talk about one thing that we've eaten or read or thought about or watched or smelt or tasted or visited, something that fed our wanderlust in that week, kept the spirit of travel alive even during the work a day. And so, Ryan, I have to ask you, do you have a last stop this week?
I do have a last stop this week, Kiernan. Would you like to hear about it?
Yeah, I would love to hear about it.
So recently, over a weekend, my good friend Christian, who's a friend of the pod, actually designer of the acclaimed Out of Office logo.
Absolutely, I acclaim it all the time, and absolutely, we love that logo. Actually, I can say that logo does so much work because when you share the link with people, they're like, "Oh yeah, another guy with a podcast," and right when they click it open and they see that artwork, they understand how legit we are.
Yeah, so thank you, Christian, for helping us put that logo together. And, Christian and I went to this thing called Spa Castle. Have you ever heard of Spa Castle?
No, but if it's an immersive experience, can we go faster, please?
It is immersive, but it is not an experience. Spa Castle is a large sort of European-style spa. It's in Queens, but there's also one in Midtown, but there's also one in Texas. They have spa castles all over the country. And basically, there are two different bathing areas for men and women where you can sort of do traditional sort of European bathing. So it's like a sauna, a steam room. There's hot tubs that you can hang out in. And these are, only they're divided by gender. So these are where the nude bathing is.
Gender. What's gender? I don't.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But then when you go upstairs, you put on like a little uniform, like a little spa uniform, these little spa shorts and a little spa t-shirt.
Yeah.
And
by the way, my spa uniform is like a heavy puffy coat with a thick hat. I like to as much covered up as possible.
Yeah, I feel like there's probably too much. There's a little too much too much skin for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I have that feeling.
Yeah. So, but upstairs in the second floor, they have a tremendous amount of special saunas. And these saunas are designed for different ailments. So there is a sauna that's all made of gold. There's a salt sauna. There's a frozen sauna that is exactly like it sounds. It's literally freezing.
It's a sauna, but it's cold?
It's called the ice sauna.
Oh, brother.
Yeah. And then there's a sauna made of jade. So there's all these different saunas.
Lord.
It's a really wild place. I mean, and I don't know anything about square feet, but it's like the biggest place you've ever been. It's like 5 stories of water excitement. upstairs there's a lot of kids and families, and there's like a lot of like a pool and stuff like that that's going on. Not very fun.
Yeah.
But I was fascinated because I've been to the Turkish baths in Istanbul. And that's a kind of a very unique experience. But this is, for something to be in New York, I think is just a very unusual sort of way to spend the day. I mean, I was incredibly relaxed when I left after my 5 hours of various saunas and hot
Which one of
tubs
those saunas do you spend the most time in?
I spent the most time in the, I guess in the downstairs male sauna.
Is it made out of males? Ugh.
It's full of them. No, I mean it's in like sort of the European bathhouse style section.
Sure.
So yeah.
Did you go in the jade one?
I did go in the jade one. The one that I thought had the most, like, that felt actually the most different was the salt one, because actually the walls were made of salt, and you could smell salt and basically taste salt when you breathed, and it was like 145 degrees in there, so it was very hot.
Wow,
very, very hot.
That is fascinating.
Yeah, and you're just sort of like laying on the ground, surrounded by a couple other people in each of these saunas.
Wow, gross. Well, that is actually one of your more interesting immersive experiences, and I disagree with you. It was an experience. It sounds like you enjoyed it greatly.
Well, there's no theater involved, Yeah.
Oh, it sounds like it might had a production of Naked Boys Dancing in that male sauna that you're talking about. Am I right?
Maybe. It is not that kind of sauna, folks. It's a straight up family approved sauna.
We'll put a link to it in the show notes so that you too can spend your time in an ice sauna, which kind of kills the idea of what a sauna is supposed to be.
What is your last stop this week, Kiernan?
Now, Ryan, I've talked before. Well, my last stop in a previous episode, a long time ago, was about Milk Street, which is this magazine that I really like. It's a food magazine started by America's Test Kitchen founder who has moved on to create this, Chris Kimball's Milk Street. And I was browsing it, and they specialize in kind of interesting international foods adapted for the American kitchen. And there was this little detail in one of the pieces of journalism that preceded a recipe that just caught my eye, and I'm now obsessed with it, which is that I discovered that in lots of the Spanish-speaking world, including Spain, Mexico, Guatemala, Peru, Chile, Argentina, Venezuela, Uruguay, Colombia, they have an alternate to the tooth fairy.
What is it?
Have you ever heard of this?
No, I mean, most folks I hang out with have lost all their teeth already.
What are you hanging out a bunch of coke?
No, I mean they've lost all their baby teeth. And I'm like,
baby teeth.
Yeah, they're not getting teeth.
Sure.
Yeah.
No. Well, listen, you've got to hang out with some young Spanish speakers. I'm talking 6 to 8 years old, your prime demographic. And they will tell you all about a little mouse that they call El Ratoncito Perez.
El Ratoncito Perez?
Again, you're just proving how wonderful your Spanish tongue is. El Ratoncito Perez, which of course means Perez mouse or Perez the mouse.
Yeah, Perez the mouse.
And the idea is when a child loses his tooth, he puts it under his pillow, and a little mouse comes and takes it and collects it. And then he collects the teeth. And so it serves exactly the same purpose as the tooth fairy, but it's a mouse.
Does he leave any money, the mouse?
So he doesn't leave cash usually, but does leave just a little sort of trinket or present. So he's even a little more creative than the tooth fairy, I'd say. He likes to put some thought into individual gifts to give.
Kids don't
in
like
return
thought. These kids want cold hard pesos.
Well, Ratoncito Perez is then not the man for them because he's going to give a gift. And I'll just say he originated in a children's book, a children's story, where he was actually the husband of the title character, whose name was La Ratita Presumida, or the vain little mouse. And the husband of that vain little mouse eventually became the tooth mouse. The tooth mouse is an alternate name for him that is used in Mexico, Guatemala, Peru, and Chile. That would be El Ratón de los Dientes.
El Ratón de los Dientes.
Fantastic. And
do you think the vain little mouse was vain because she had a great mouth of teeth? She just had these great teeth, and the little tooth mouse it goes around collecting teeth because he doesn't have as good a set.
So I don't think the idea is that he takes your human teeth and then puts him in his own mouth, because
what does
that
he do
would
with
be
them?
Revolting and disgusting. He collects them. He enjoys them. It's
that's not disgusting.
It's like me with
huge collection of human teeth. That's normal. Totally normal mouse behavior.
It's like you and I with playbills. We collect playbills. He collects teeth.
I do not sneak into little children's rooms and steal their playbills. That is not something you do. I don't. Are you going to do the tooth fairy with your kid?
I'm thinking, I want my kids to be international citizens of the world. So I think that they may get Raton Perez saying hola to their dientes.
I hope that is true. I want to hold you to that.
And so there's entertainment properties out there. I would say you should check out the CGI little tooth mice that exist out there. They've become full franchises in the Spanish-speaking world.
I can't believe that there wasn't one of these little mice in Coco. I mean, that missed a perfect opportunity.
The Pixar movie. Yeah,
do a little crossover.
Oh, that would have been fantastic.
Maybe the sequel. Maybe it'll be Coco 2. Coco and the vain little mouse return.
Y el ratón de los dientes go wild.
If you're listening, Pixar,
you can have that for free.
No. That's a good idea. Directed DVD, directed streaming. Yeah.
And one last important thing is that in Spain, there's actually a memorial plaque outside the warehouse where he is supposed to live. So in Spain, there have been a number of different folktale versions of this. And this one says, "Here lived in a box of cookies, Ratoncito Perez," and it goes on from there.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense why he needs the teeth if he's living in a box of cookies. That is
Fair point.
Not the best dental practice.
No. All right, Ryan. Well, you're going to male spas. I'm looking at, Spanish.
No. It wasn't a male spa. It's a family spa. I want this to be clear to our listeners.
I'm looking up, mice who collect teeth. I mean, we have very different weekends, is what I'm trying to say. Now, Ryan, what are we talking about next week?
Next week, we are talking about some of London's sort of smaller hidden museums.
Absolutely. There is a whole class of lesser-known secret museums. I've been to most of them. Ryan's been to a bunch of them. We are going to walk through our favorite secret London museums.
Well, I look forward to exploring some of London's most secret museums with you next week, Kiernan. And until then, I'm Ryan Davis.
And I'm Kiernan Schmidt.
And this is Out of Office, a travel podcast.
This seat taken.
Just imagine like a little mouse crawling underneath your bed and Inties. Yeah, no, not good.